Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
The question on the table today, why are we doing what we're doing here at 1850 Main Street?
We should title this Full Disclosure, where we actually have the opportunity.
Well, let me get my lawyer in here. We're going to do full disclosure.
All the NDAs go off the table. I talk a lot about mega media, and yet you and I are a part of the media. We've been a part of the media for a long time, and I'm not sure people even know how long. So you started in radio.
1982.
Actually, you started as a child.
Well, yeah, actually. My dad was a very successful radio personality in very large markets, and so I grew up around all the best talent. My dad took Robert W. Morgan's place in Chicago, and in Chicago was very successful, then went to New Orleans and was very successful for decades. So radio was not anything huge to me. It was just my father's business. I was going to be a pastor and ended up in radio. I began just even when I was in college, volunteering at a local Christian music station. And then eventually my Bible college never opened and I ended up in radio. So I guess I'm at 42, 43 years, somewhere in there. And wow. 36 of those in talk radio, which began as a journey and a vision of Tom Crimseer. He took my father, who was an iconic radio personality, and I was a disc jockey in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and thought, let's put the father and son together and have America's only father and son morning show. And so that's how I got started in talk radio with my dad, who was a legend in talk radio. That was the extent of my journey. I mean, I wasn't like I sought out to be this. I want to be this. I never, I do love the intimacy of radio and touching lives.
You started before talk was talk. In fact, you actually hung around Rush Limbaugh when Rush Limbaugh wasn't Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, well, at the time, there was a kind of a crossing of paths. We wanted to put Rush on, we were starting national talk radio network, TRN, talk radio network. And we were launching kind of like a national radio network, kind of what Premier became. We were ahead of our time. And at that time, Rush was coming from KFBK in Sacramento and heading to WABC in New York. And Ed McLaughlin was involved. And Ed had the same vision we did. Ed won, we lost. All right. So Rush ends up going his way. And then I end up, the best I could do for Rush, who was a friend, was be one of his first affiliates. And so we put him on WTIX in New Orleans. In fact, we were the very first Rush to Excellence tour was at the Superdome. And I considered it a blessing. Rush was, at that time, not bigger than life, but he was just an extraordinary guy. He did have the vision, obviously, because if God's going to use him to create an industry, that seed's got to be in him. I didn't have that. I like to have fun in the air. I like to entertain people. I like to inform people. And then I like to intimately touch them every now and then with what really matters in life. Rush had a clear vision and executed it, and he became an icon, and I became a schmo. That's pretty much how that story ends. But yes, terrific guy. We had some hilarious experiences in Washington, D.C. together, where both of us couldn't believe we were in rooms with people we were in rooms with. And he used to always look at me and do the same thing. He'd go, just act like you belong. That was his theory. And I went, okay, And we're introducing ourselves to the vice president, wondering how we got by security. But yeah, those were great times.
The similarity in both of our angles of coming into radios, I started in radio, creating a high school radio station. Interestingly enough, back in the early 70s. That's when I was in high school. I started in radio. Then I was in education and trying to pay for education for a whole long time. When I came to work for the American Policy Roundtable, we decided to get into radio. So that was in 1989. Our entrance into radio is from the platform of public policy and using radio as a tool to spread the word, to reach people. So we bring the philosophy and the ideas in. You, and I'll put Rush in the same category, developed your worldviews not to fit into a radio niche to get paid. You brought your worldview into radio. Rush brought his worldview into radio.
To the point where I couldn't believe I didn't get fired. For decades, that's the one mystery I had. And that's when I really developed a faith that, okay, if I was doing this in the flesh, I'd probably be fired. But God has called me to do this, and so I must be protected. But yes, that's the one thing people say to me more than anything. I can't believe you get away with saying, well, in the end, I didn't. And then he just found a safe place for me with iHeart. But yeah, that's a unique difference.
Yeah.
Because if I was doing this for radio, well, I'd be a fraud.
So it's not with Rush. There was a lot about Rush that was shtick. There was a lot about Rush that was an act, that he projected a certain personality, that he was not exactly the same guy off the air as he was on the air, and not a contradiction, not an evil twin.
He believed everything he did on the air. The shtick part was the entertainment value, which was key, because up until then, that was the problem. Talk radio could never be entertaining.
Innovator.
Mm-hmm.
He was a total innovator, and in that regard, a world changer without a doubt. Hall of Fame beyond. I mean, they should rename the Hall of Fame after him. All right, it's just that simple, because of the impact in culture. But the impact of talk radio has also been huge, because it's one of the only places where people can listen and process ideas and think. Now, everything else is so over the top, but talk radio is still a wonderful way of idea transmission, where we can take time, and there's feedback, and there's back and forth. All right, so you brought your worldview in. I brought my worldview in. Your morning show is an example. Your morning show with Michael DelGiorno, which is now, by the time we're talking about this, we're 12, 15, soon to be 20.
We'll be at 16. We'll be at 16 in a week or two, and then
20. Soon 20 markets across the country.
0 to 16 in less than the first quarter of the year. I think only God knows where it's headed.
So the up and coming, real growing, new approach to morning radio has a worldview that isn't paid for. The worldview comes into the idea of the process. One of the reasons that and that's your morning show, and I get the opportunity to appear with you regularly. I kind of hang around and we have fun talking with each other, but that's a very restricted clock, and it's a very exciting program. And it's what I can't tell you how many people I know who never turned the radio on in the morning, who all over the country turn on either in the market that we're in, or they're listening on the iHeart app. And they're listening all over the country, whether the show's in their market or not. They have come to really enjoy getting started in the morning with a conversation. So that's very helpful. Now, it's made life for you and I a little bit more difficult, because we kind of like to start our morning with a conversation.
Cup of coffee and family.
And then go to the scriptures and spend some time thinking on the transcendent, eternal one, and trying to get our marching orders for the day, which means those mornings got to go a lot earlier than they did, because we're talking really early mornings. Okay, we got that. The reason we did 1850 and why we do this broadcast is because in a limited clock, where we only have a half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour just to kind of come in and out in the morning to try to interpret the news. And I love the fact that you're morning, because we get the jump start on all the stories of the day. Before all the other guys are out there doing it at 9 and 12 and 3, we're there. We're at the very beginning.
We're kind of like that. There's that little room. There's that little room in the hospital that nobody wants to go into. There's just a small table, a box of tissue, and 2 chairs. It's the room you never want to be called into. Now, thankfully, I've been called into it twice, and my mom beat it twice. So she's quite the survivor. But sometimes it can feel like that, There's things every morning that are going on that don't paint the rosiest of pictures. And so you wonder, are we, in some kind of a terminal state? We try to inform people, but not tell them how to think, but give them things to think about, kind of ease them into the day. I like that we present a kind of a hopeful, quiet confidence in all of this. But yeah, to the quantity statement, you got little 8-minute windows at the beginning of a day. You don't want to go too deep. You wouldn't want to get up and have pot roast in the morning. That's why we break our fat, a little toast, maybe an egg. And so I kind of view it quantitatively and qualitatively, where 1850 allows us to deep dive. One is kind of the big auditorium classroom. One is kind of the small, intimate master's deep thinking classroom. I respect and love both lanes equally. And I would hope that someday, as your morning show continues to grow, 1850 grows with it, because just as we added Sacramento, just as we added Columbus, Georgia, just as last week we added Memphis, Tupelo, Akron, Youngstown, as each of these new cities come on board, I hope they start their day this way. Actually, in the case of Sacramento, maybe their ending their late night that way. But I hope they also, a certain amount of them, decide to go even deeper into the master's kind of deep end. But it's all conversation, because that's, you talk about what Rush began, and he really did begin it. Prior to Rush, there was, who was his name? Bruce Williams. Bruce would do financial advice. Yeah, Dr. Joy Brown. Remember, she would do the psychology advice. I mean, talk radio.
And you always had Imus. You always had
yeah, there was. Well, even Imus was later as far as national, but no, Rush created it all, and I think we all became caricatures of, not I wasn't, but a lot of people in my industry became caricatures of him. In fact, to give you an example, I think Michael Reagan was better than Rush, but Rush was first.
Yeah.
And then I think, just as television was always talking at you and radio was talking with you, talk radio kind of began to devolve into that. This talk guy is smart. He's in his ivory tower. He's going to tell you how to think. And I like that God has chosen perhaps us to get everybody back to the basics. There is no wise man in the room. We're all in this together. Let's sit down. Let's take the time. Let's understand. Let's talk it through together.
It's halftime here at 1850 Main Street. Time to freshen up that cup of coffee. You can start every morning off right by listening to Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Tune in to stations across America and online at the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day with Your Morning Show on the iHeart Network.
So you've got a breakfast morning table program that is working really well, and it is growing across the nation, thanks be to God. But you and I don't get the satisfaction most of the time of knowing that in that brief period, we only got a few subjects started. We only helped kind of set the table on where the issues are for the day. And the reason we went to 1850 as a podcast is not because we needed something more to do. First off, I don't make any money helping you on your job is your morning show. I'm a friend and a partner that helps you on your morning show. Neither of us get paid from iHeart or anybody else to do 1850.
No.
This is something you and I decided we should do because the country is in deep, deep trouble.
Can I say it a different way? Because you said this is going to be true confessions or non-disclosure or disclosure or whatever.
Yeah.
Full disclosure. And something we would protect to the death. So it doesn't matter how busy you or I get. And I got to be honest with you, your morning show grew faster than I thought it would. And where it's headed is pretty intimidating. And it ended up being not just earlier hours, a lot more hours, okay?
Yeah,
and then you're only running like 5 other projects and businesses. But we all, just when we get at a capacity, whether it's you, it initiates from you or from me, we instantly go, the easiest thing to do would be stop doing this. I'm like, no, this is necessary. I always view it this way. You can have a big classroom where you do your lecture, and then one really interested, curious student that must know more and must understand the why more comes up after class. And then you go for a walk through the campus quad and you really break things down and you really learn from each other and discover from each other. No, we can't do this in 1850. To some degree, you can't do this on the public square, although you do a lot closer. No, this is a unique time we're sharing. And not everybody comes to this class. But this class must always exist and the doors must always be open. That's how I view it.
The partnership and the strategy of it is that having all of those years of history in talk radio and in issues and in what's going on, and then bringing in the public policy perspective of 44 years of the American Policy Roundtable. There are very few organizations that have enough dirt under their fingernails that they can actually talk historically about what has happened in the past, how these things actually work, why this idea sounds good on paper but is really horrible, and then cite chapter and verse because it was tried in this time, it failed in this time, and this is how this. So the idea of having real nuts and bolts brings that. So when we talk about 1850, we're talking about the health and welfare of the country for our kids and our grandkids, and that's why it's got to be more than shirts and skins, because you may have an election where one side beats the other side, but that never settles an issue. We're talking about the long-term health and welfare of American liberty. And that's why we cast this in as 1850, because for 10 years before the Civil War, people had the opportunity to have these kind of conversations, and they failed. and they ended up killing each other. I read a quote from Blaise Pascal in the 1600s. Pascal's one of the great philosophers on the concept of science, morality, government. He said, the worst kind of war is civil war. It's the worst kind of war.
Because we're all in it together and we all die together.
We all die together. What those wars break cannot be repaired. And the idea that people are talking now about that we're on the edge of civil war, they may be right. Our advocacy position is you can't go there. You'd be better off to die to stop it than to die in it. And so that's the heartbeat behind 1850, which then takes us to the public square. So we've got 2 lanes. Now there's the third lane. Now, this one is where the sort of the weight of the paradigm shifts. I help you out on your morning show because I love you and because I care.
I don't do anything on public square. In fact, come to think of it, I've never been welcomed on the. No, I take that back. I was on once.
Yes,
remember that one interview made it to the public square.
And not only was that
smooth enough, I'm not refined enough, I'm not intellectual enough to be in that group.
So we're still working on you. You might get there yet. The public square is designed to scratch an itch in America. Believe it or not, the most listened to radio in America on a weekly basis is National Public Radio. It's in that many stations, it's a syndicated network in that many places. Now, Limbaugh probably was bigger than NPR, given hours and times, but across this, as far as they're big. They're really big. Look at the Harvard study on media. NPR's right at the top because of the way.
To this day, I could take you through the Nielsen ratings of the top 100 markets, and probably 30 of those markets, the NPR station is beating all the commercial talk stations. I could go into morning and afternoon drives specifically. They're either right there or winning. They are significant. This is a last 5-year phenomenon, by the way, 5 to 10 years. They are significant top 10 players. You'll see it when you go through the ratings, and you'll always see, and they always have the university call letters because it's usually a university station. But yeah, no, that is not a hyperbole. That is a fact, Jack, and it's never been more true than right now.
And there is, without a doubt, an equal fact, and that is that they come with an extreme progressive point of view. We could call it a bias. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and they don't apologize for it, and they don't hide it, and they're having a significant influence in culture. The public square walks right into that and says, okay, everybody, let's go. Drop your textbooks, drop your degrees, let's put them all on the table, and let's have that conversation. Because there are real answers to real questions within the context of a historical and biblical worldview. That's the worldview that built this country and gave NPR the liberty to do what they do. So if you're going to trash that liberty and trash that worldview, then let's talk about the consequences and that there is an alternative way of looking at life. So we wade into that. So now that is unfortunately viewed as the master's class just because people think it's not necessarily entertaining. What we found over the years now, because we've been doing the public square in one of the many fashions, starting with a 2-minute show, the whole way to a regular hour show, to daily shows, 30-minute shows, people who become listeners to the public square love the program. They not only find it entertaining, they find it refreshing. I mean, through COVID, I can't tell you how many people wrote to us and said, you kept me sane through COVID. I know you heard the same thing from your radio programming as well. So there's a tremendous conversation going on. Now, you would think that with these 3 lanes, that has got to be at least $20 million of advertising and sponsorship and horsepower behind these 3 lanes. You'd be surprised how few people create all of this programming. I did a little count on numbers. The Public Square Network alone this year will create over 1,100 radio products that will be out in the air. We're on the air somewhere every day.
So what's that come to? A little about 4 a day almost.
Yeah. And different forms of programming, whether it's Christmas in America, or Kids on the Square, the Public Square 2-minute, 30-minute, 60-minute. I mean, there's a boatload of programming going out. You're doing 5 days a week on your morning show together, and we're doing 1850 3 more times a week. There's a tremendous amount of programming going out now. And why am I telling you that? I just want people to know that are listening. Guess what? Something's going on here. Maybe it's called a radio revival. I don't know. Now, the irony is, when I used to talk to Christian businessmen, who should be, of course, like the most motivated to want to reach the culture And I would say, we need to be buying radio stations. We need to be investing in audio programming. They look at me and say, what, have you not read the charts? Are you not hip on the internet? Do you not have a cell phone? Why would anyone invest in that? That's like going in the outdoor. What, you've lost your mind? Now, what's the single most popular form of communication in America is podcasting. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw that coming. Think about the influence of programming just like this. Think about guys like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that because, we had that long conversation about Rush Limbaugh. Nobody really recognized Rush Limbaugh in his time, not at the beginning, not for the first decade. He literally created an industry, and he was actually treated like a shock jock when he was doing it. Is Joe Rogan the Rush Limbaugh of today and creating the new podcast industry? And my mind goes there because there are 7-8 million podcasts. Most aren't doing anything but talking to themselves or a small circle of people. But no, Joe Rogan is the Rush Limbaugh of the podcast era. Getting on Joe Rogan's like getting on Johnny Carson's couch, and it's hard to get on. That is interesting. I wonder how this all plays out. And as far as talk radio, it needs to reimagine itself in a hurry.
And this is so the reimagination. We just talked about 3 lanes that are actually re-engineering, reconstructing the whole idea of we need to have a conversation about things that really, truly matter. The nice thing about those 3 lanes is, yes, your morning show is an iHeartRadio product, and yes, it's the traditional contractual arrangements. Advertisers are pursued, and please, if you'd like to advertise on your morning show, it's a great idea. I can say that.
Actually, let me chime in and just say I love my company, and my company cares as much about listeners and in the same way that we're describing as I do. And they're bringing me to cities I would have given my eye tooth to live in and work for them in, and I get to do them collectively. So at some point, I'm in some kind of broadcast heaven, and they're the greatest. But yeah, that one we profit from. 1850 is a completely different lane, and the public square is the cornerstone beginning lane. We keep referring to the public square last. It really began with the public square, but
and these products.
But I love all 3. It's like a kid. I can't tell you which one I love more, and one is not. I'm not even allowed on, and I love.
And
it,
here's
so.
here's the irony.
Not even. I'm doing a Jack Benny right now. This doesn't work on a podcast, but I was doing a Jack Benny.
Here's the irony of all of this. Yes, there's advertising in the iHeart mechanism. It should be. No one's got a problem with that, and that's the way it radio works.
Why don't we make any money on the other 2?
Well, because we give them away. And why do we give away 1850? And why do we give away without subscription fee? Why do we give away the public square?
Like here at Christmas in America, and there's like a table back there of books or this or that. And you just say, just go take one. We trust you.
Yeah. Just take it. Here.
I mean, maybe we could do another show on, would it kill us to make a little?
But here's the point. And I'll tell you, it's a good question. What's the motivation behind that? The motivation behind that is we're not inventing the truth. We're discovering it. We didn't invent it. We're blessed to have discovered it. And the one who came to this world and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, said, freely you've received, freely give. If we're willing to start off from that premise, what we find is that people then feel that they can share this without any fear that someone else is going to take advantage of their friends and neighbors, because we're just talking about the same truth we've discovered. We've got years of dirt under our fingernails. We got years of experience. We got all the backup that you need to compete at any level. It's not about that. It's about one beggar telling another beggar where to find a piece of bread. And freely you've received, so freely give. Now, what we do find is that kind of truth transmission creates an incredible loyalty. And we don't necessarily, it's even hard to call them listeners because we're just friends. The friends who listen and project this broadcast as their own radio stations do support the nonprofit works that undergird them. And for that, we're very, very grateful. But we don't ask anybody to pay walking in. We just ask you to consider. Just consider. It's Discovery Radio. And that's what's different about it. It's Discovery Radio. Somebody says, well, that's never going to work. Well, stick around. We'll see.
Yeah, good time of the year to mention. We just reached our Sweet 16 at your morning show. Who would have thought that in less than a quarter? And big markets, too. Tampa, Memphis, Nashville, Youngstown, Akron, Oklahoma City.
And hopefully more to come. That's it. Those are the lanes. That's why we do what we do. And don't expect any of us to be on Forbes 100 richest in America of doing it. It's not what the goal is.
No, but I would like a little help covering Corey the Yard Boy's bill if you could throw me a few.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. And if you want more, check out Your Morning Show and The Public Square. Your Morning Show is where you can hear Michael and David talking about the stories of the day every day. And you can learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy at The Public Square. You can listen to Your Morning Show and The Public Square on the iHeart mobile app and on radio stations across the country. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.